Hello gang, Tattooed Biker here with you, and tonight we're headed into the mysterious world of Bigfoot and Sasquatch sightings. You see, I've received some compelling and fascinating reports from viewers just like you, detailing true encounter stories with this elusive cryptid. From the coastal forest of South Carolina to the remote mountains of Utah, these eyewitness accounts paint vivid pictures of encounters with the legendary beast. And I'm quickly to learn that fact is stranger than fiction. So are you ready for 5 gripping and authentic reports of Sasquatch, shared exclusively by viewers? If so, grab your boots, and let's ride to Bigfoot country. Number 1. Dear Biker, when I was younger, my family went camping a lot. We used to go into the Uinta Mountains in Utah most of the time. There was a lake that we would camp next to, so of course my family would be fishing. My dad, my mom, my uncle and I were on the shore trying to catch fish. Across the shore, on the other side of the small lake, my dad noticed a huge, black-haired figure just standing still and looking right at us. This thing had to have been at least 8 feet tall, maybe even taller since it was so far away. My dad tried yelling at it, since he had thought it was a prank of some sort. I don't remember exactly what he said, but I remember the sound that the creature made back. It wasn't anything that we understood, just a kind of unintelligible screeching. It did, however, sound like it knew what my dad was saying, and like it was saying something to us, only in its own language. We were all looking at it at that point. My grandparents and my brother had joined us, and I remember my parents attempted to recreate the screeches that it was making, and it would respond. This went on for a few minutes. Then the creature just took off, and I mean quick and fast, on hands and feet. The entire time before it had been on 2 feet like a human. It turned and started running towards the forest and was out of sight in seconds. It had to have been going like 25 to 30 miles per hour. My brother, grandpa, and dog tried chasing it and went to where we had seen it and in the direction it had left. They did find a huge lump of black hair that was stuck in a barbed wire fence, although I'm not certain it was really from the creature. Why we didn't leave still puzzles me. We spent the night in tents, and it was very windy, and I don't think anyone actually slept. I was worried that this thing might come around our campsite, and I'm not sure the rest of my family was concerned. I think about it from time to time still, but honestly, it isn't that rare of an encounter in Utah. I've seen UFOs. My brother was followed by a UFO, and I lived near Skinwalker Ranch my whole life. Because of our native Ute tradition, I believe that many of my people take encounters like these in stride. Thanks for reading. Signed, Brian. Number 2. Hey TB, my encounter happened on the second Saturday of November 2010 in Central Texas. I worked late Friday, which put me waking up Saturday much later than planned. So I decided on a late day hunt, and I figured I'd go out around 3 p.m. and sit in the pop-up ground blind until dark. I got there just before 3, got ready and headed out. By that time, it was about 10 minutes after. As soon as I hit the woods, I smelled this horrible odor. I was still a good 75 yards from the blind, but the smell was of death and even worse. I've never smelled anything like it before. It was as if a dead animal had been out in the sun for quite a while, but there was also a mixture of other odors. I stopped and looked around for the dead animal, but saw nothing, so I continued on my way. There's this game trail that breaks off onto another trail. It would bring you to the back of the blind, and I never took that way. I always went through the woods to a fence line, and then turned left and then just followed the fence out to the blind. I finally got to the fence line, and the smell was a bit stronger, so I stopped to look around for the dead animal again. But again, there was nothing. So I turned left and started off towards the blind. I was probably 50 yards from the blind, and I could see someone at the blind. I flipped my rifle safety off and kept going. As I got closer, I thought to myself, well, it's not Dad, it's another hunter. As I got a little closer, I could tell his head was in the pop-up blind window. And I thought that was strange, as a hunter would be in a ghillie suit. As I got nearer, the hunter looked like someone dressed in a Bigfoot suit. Thinking that's a good way to get shot. 30 or 40 yards out, that horrible odor hit me again, square in the face. At the same time, its head popped out of the blind window, and we looked eye to eye at each other for what seemed like forever, although I'm sure it was just a matter of seconds. There were no trees or brush between us, a clear view. I literally froze. I didn't move at all as it stomped the ground and grunted at me. All I could do was stand frozen in place in my fear. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. It stepped out of the blind and walked away from me, down the fence line, and then pushed the fence down as it stepped over. It looked back at me while it walked across the field, and I watched as it reached another fence, which it easily stepped over. It reached the edge of the far woods and then disappeared from my sight. I got a clear look at it from head to toe. Face, muscles moving under the fur, the whole 9 yards. It looked quite human in the face, although a bit Neanderthal-like. The reddish color resembled that of an orangutan, with a Caucasian skin tone. It had to have been 8 to 10 feet tall and was jacked with muscle. I mean, like a bodybuilder's tone. There was no mistaking it for a female. I've included a sketch to show the size comparison. I'm about 5'9" or 5'10", and so it's safe to say that my hunting days are over. Signed, Sully. Number 3. Hey, Tattooed Biker. I have something I'd like to share. You see, I grew up in southeast Texas, about 40 miles west of Houston, and lived on a small farm. Sometimes at night, there would be something screaming out in the fields from time to time. My neighbors heard it as well. One morning, while waiting for the school bus at the end of our driveway, I looked down and noticed a very large, bare footprint in the sand. The heel had been run over by my dad going to work, but the rest of it was plain as day. About 12 inches long and at least 7 inches wide was still exposed that you could see. I knew that it was a Sasquatch print. I wanted to show someone, but here comes the bus, and I had no time to run back home and get my brother to take a look. That afternoon, when I got off the bus to see the track again, so many cars had gone in and out of the driveway that day that it was now completely gone. I sure was disappointed about that. I tried to tell my brothers and a few friends about it, but I don't think they really believed me. There was a neighbor in the 1970s who lived on the property directly north of ours. He went deer hunting, shot one, and then took it home. He tied up the deer to field dress it, hanging it from a tree limb. His wife called him in for breakfast, and after he came out to field dress the deer, he looked and saw the deer that he had tied up wasn't there. He noticed it being dragged over a fence and into the woods, but he never saw what had it. Everyone said it was a big cat that got it, but looking back now, I know that big cats pick up their prey with their teeth and walk forward. This deer was being dragged. Cats don't drag anything backwards. And how would a cougar be able to pull the deer down from the rope that it was tied up with? It was like this cat that got the man's deer. The big cat would have been the last thing he saw going over the fence and into the woods, not the deer itself. Anyway, I was talking recently to a friend of mine who grew up next door to me. He's in his 50s now, and I'm in my mid-40s. He told me that he went fishing in the 90s on the lake that was on the property where the man had his deer drug off. He said while he was walking up to the lake in the woods that he saw trees that had had the bark stripped off them about 9 feet up off the ground, and it looked like there were claw marks in the bare wood beneath. While he was fishing there that day, he began to get the feeling that he was being watched. That made him really nervous, but then he noticed a very strong, musky odor that he had never smelled before. And then he got the heck out of there, fast. He said that when he goes to visit his parents' place, he can still smell that smell from time to time in the air. He also said that he and his brothers would hear whistling and whoops on their property, but never saw what was making that noise. He said that they also heard stuff walking on 2 feet on their property at night, but never saw anything then either. Another incident in the exact same area back in the 60s, where some guys went swimming at their lake one evening. It was about a half-mile from my home. The 2 brothers and a couple of friends were swimming. Their car horns started blowing. There were no houses close by, and they thought that my uncle had gone over there messing with them. They kind of got spooked because they couldn't see their car since it had become dark. So they got out of the lake and grabbed their flashlights, running over to where their car was parked. They told me there were very strange footprints in the sand all around their car. Then they knew it wasn't my uncle messing with them because the prints were huge and barefoot, and it had to have been an extremely large person to have left them. But nothing was ever said about a Sasquatch. They just thought it was some huge man without shoes on. One more thing that happened to my older brother and cousin makes me think that it's been a Sasquatch the whole time. You see, my mother had a twin sister, and they were always out doing stuff together. So one evening, there was a special at church, and my parents and my aunt and uncle went to it. My older brother and cousin stayed at my aunt's house, while the grown-ups were all at church. Long story short, my aunt and uncle had a cattle farm, and they had dogs that were kind of mean per se, but really just didn't take a like to people much. They always stayed outside. Now, my aunt's place was about 200 acres. Anyway, it was a really large place, and while my brother and cousin were there just watching TV or whatever, the dogs started whining outside. Now, they had 7 or 8 of them. And these dogs, they never came inside of the house, but suddenly they were scratching at the door, wanting in. Then they heard what sounded like something scraping the window screen in the living room. This was summertime, and the windows were open. That scared my cousin and brother enough to lock themselves in the bathroom until our parents all came back from church a few hours later. My brother said that he was in the 10th grade at the time, and my cousin would have been in the 7th. My brother said it sounded just like something was scraping its fingernails on the window screens. It would do it at one window for a bit, and then go to the next window. He said that whatever it was went around to all windows of that house and scratched on all the screens. I thought about these things on and off that had happened to my brother, neighbors, and cousins a lot down through the years. And after putting 2 and 2 together, and some things that I've experienced as an adult, I look back at those weird events, and I now believe that it was a Sasquatch that had done these things that took place. Signed, Gene. Number 4. Dear Biker, back when I lived in northwest Oklahoma City, I would frequently take evening walks at the Sitchcomb Wildlife Refuge. The preserve is roughly 1,000 acres, located on the suburbs of Oklahoma City and adjacent to the Wiley Post Airport. Beginning from the parking lot at the end of Northwest 50th Street, the maintenance road will take you 2.5 miles upriver to the Kilpatrick Bridge, where the North Canadian River enters the preserve. However, the city only maintains the trail to the remote communication building, and from there, the trail becomes overgrown in the summers. The park is typically visited by local neighbors, bicyclists, horseback riders, and dog lovers. That particular evening, I decided to venture past the communication building. I continued another half-mile up the path to where the power lines cross the river. From there, the riverbank drops about 15 feet, giving a nice view of the river below. As I approached the area, my eyes immediately caught someone down at the river's edge. What I saw was an all-black figure down at the river about 250 feet away. I thought it was strange because not many people hike off trail into the preserve during the summers this late in the evening, or even past the communication building. As I watched this man down at the riverbank, I started to notice subtle details, like golden red hair in the sunset. I also didn't notice any distinct clothing, but just hair alone. At this moment, I remember being really confused as to what I was seeing. Whoever was down at the river began to walk inland, using its arms to move the reed bushes. And that's when I saw the long hair dangling from its arm, shoulder to hand. Oh my God, it's Bigfoot, I thought. I immediately began to reach for my phone without taking my eyes off the creature. And that's when it noticed me. What terrified me the most was I wasn't able to make out any detail on its face. It's like my brain just couldn't process it all of a sudden as we made eye contact. And that's when this sheer feeling of terror suddenly overtook me and I just ran. I continued running until I met a couple with their dog back at the communication building. I'll never forget the look of confusion on their faces when I came sprinting around the corner. I wanted to stop and tell them about my experience, but for some reason I couldn't will my panic away long enough to even stop, and so I continued to run. The following day I returned to look for footprints, but was unable to venture into the reeds. Weirdly enough, the experience wasn't enough to scare me away completely. It's like after a bit that feeling of sheer terror slowly faded, and instead I was more cautious of the time and day and surroundings. I continued to exercise at Stitchcomb until I moved to Arizona in July of 2019. Thanks for reading. Signed, Richard. Number 5. Dear Tattooed Biker, I'd like to share a Bigfoot encounter with you that I, along with my brother and sister, had back in 2022. Now about me. I'm a doctor, and I'm not prone to wild bouts of imagination. And I can safely say that before this encounter, I didn't believe in Bigfoot nor in any cryptids or the paranormal. Well, anyways, it was August 2nd, and my brother, sister, and I were visiting the lighthouse at South Carolina's Hunting Island State Park. It was around noon when we were leaving the lighthouse parking lot and driving along the exit road from the lighthouse. My brother was driving, with me riding shotgun and my sister in the rear driver's side seat. As we rounded a slight curve, we spotted this creature walking quickly on the left side of the road, maybe only 15 to 20 feet in front of the car. It all happened pretty fast as this thing disappeared into the lush palmetto and pine forest that surrounds that road. My brother immediately jammed on the brakes, bringing the car to an abrupt halt, and asked if we had seen what he saw. All three of us agreed on seeing this thing. In fact, we all saw it very clearly as it was walking directly in front of the car. The three of us just sat and chatted and realized that we had all seen exactly the same details. This creature was walking upright, taking these long, almost casual-looking strides, but was somehow covering ground extremely quickly before disappearing into the bush on the left side of the road. We got the best look at the lower torso of the creature, as its head and shoulders were somewhat obscured behind an overhanging branches and leaves. The height of the creature wasn't huge. Like I would have expected, it looked to be about 5 to 6 feet tall. Legs were approximately 3 feet long with human-like jointed knees. It was covered in dark brown or splashy black hair that was approximately 2 inches long. The entire incident only lasted a few seconds, as the thing disappeared quickly into the thick underbrush. There were no sounds or odors noticed by any of us. We all just sat there in a state of amazement as to what had just occurred, and because it had all happened so quickly. We've enjoyed taking many vacations in that park through the years since we were children, back from the 1950s to the present. Now, although that area is abundant in wildlife, we've never witnessed anything like this in the past. The three of us reported the incident to the Hunting Island State Park office the next day, and the park superintendent called me a short time later, and I provided him with a full description and details of the incident. He informed me that he would take the report as a credible incident and initiate an investigation. And a few days after the incident, I reported the sighting on the BFRO website, and they also called me back about a week later and asked a few follow-up questions, but I didn't really have any more to add than I shared here. I have included some coordinates and GPS location pictures of the exact spot that it took place. I also included a photo of myself and my siblings that we took that day, but please don't show our faces. Thanks for reading. Signed, Bob. And there it is. 5 true reports of Bigfoot sightings and activity. I hope you enjoyed hearing these as much as I enjoyed reading them. I'd like to send a thank you out to all those who shared their experiences with us. And thanks to all of you out there for taking the time to listen. If you have an experience with the unexplained that you would like to share, don't be shy. Just reach out to me via the email address in the description, and your story may just wind up in a future video. So, thanks for riding with me tonight. And as always, stay curious, stay vigilant, stay safe, and I'll be seeing you on down the road a ways. Biker, out.